Welcome to YouX, the global podcast at the intersection of research, design, and development. Sit back and listen as your hosts explore the ever-evolving world of user experience. And now, Chris Covell and Mustafa Ahmed.
Welcome to UX. Mustafa, how's it going today?
All good, Chris. How are things with you?
Things are going good. Excited for today's topic. I think today we have a really interesting and important one that touches a lot of some of the topics that we've already brought up in past episodes, like, business strategy and how to conceptualize UX and how UX research and design kind of interrelate and work together. So we're calling this episode digital first, but not digital only. So a lot to get to today, but maybe you want to go ahead and introduce the topic and kick us off.
So over the last decade, I've personally kind of observed, a lot of these organizations adopt a digital first strategy, right? And wherein they've translated a lot of their brick and mortar experiences to a digital experience, right? To take advantage of the obvious business and technology outcomes that come with it. But we've also seen that when you go pure digital only, there's been a tendency to overlook the experience part of it, the human element, because the human element gets lost. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so over time, some of the more mature organizations that have done this kind of transformation right have been digital first, but not digital only. And I guess today I wanted to, go through and talk about the impact, the benefits, what we've seen works well, what doesn't, and how research and design has a role to play into crafting the ultimate experience that brings about a lot of these business and technology advantages, but also at the same time, you don't lose out on the human component.
Well, a lot to get to. I'm excited about this topic for, those reasons that you mentioned, but also too, because I think it gets at a kind of fundamental disagreement or maybe misconception that happens a lot of times that I've found as I've kind of gone through my UX career, which is how people conceptualize UX as being, research and designers, professionals who really only focus on digital solutions and digital experiences, right? And I think that is not, especially when, and we'll probably get into it, later on in the conversations, but when you're thinking about solving problems for customers and really trying to make the best possible experience, I think technology should only increase and enhance that experience. And I think that it has to do it's the best experiences can be omnichannel, can be a combination of digital experience, physical experiences, and how the two kind of interrelate. And I think that gets overlooked or missed out a lot of times when UXers are trying to think of solutions and they just go straight to Figma and they go straight to the app. There obviously it's like it depends, right? Because like if you're working on a SaaS tool or something like that, it becomes much harder to create a more holistic, technology agnostic experience. But I do kind of want to make sure that we're talking about UX and not only meaning that it should be digital first, I think in some level, but not digital only, which is I think creates the best experiences, or can at least.
Yeah, no, 100% with you on that. So Chris, let's kick things off in terms
Sure.
of, what do you think are some of the things that we as designers and researchers have to kind of keep in mind of when building out this kind of, experience from the lens of a design / research?
Yeah, it depends on how I think the context. I mean, you mentioned upfront, you're talking a lot about digital transformations, right? And I think that's a little bit of a buzzwordy, over the last 10 or 15 years, just because of the digital revolution. Not everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. Everyone has a PC now, practically all over the globe. And those numbers, percentage of people with those things only keep rising. And, you had a lot of these legacy systems that companies wanted to transition into digital. And I think the first question, becomes, well, is that even possible? Obviously it's very context specific. However, I think you and me both, I mean, maybe you can tell me, but I would assume that you would think that, there's elements of in-person experiences or physical experiences when you want to translate them over into digital that gets lost. And I think this is beautiful and perfect for UXers to talk about, because in many cases, it saves businesses money. It makes these new digital transformations make sense from a bottom line point of view, right? Because things happen faster. I don't know, they save paper, whatever, however you want to kind of like, make it make sense from a business point of view. But as you brought up and as you framed in the beginning, there's an element that gets lost, and the experience I don't know if it's always the case, but it can become worse, right? And how do we as technologists and people who think about the experience always whenever new products and services or systems are getting developed, that's kind of our main core competency. How do we make sure that there isn't a downgrade or the experience isn't getting denigrated in any way? I think that when you take legacy systems and you create digital, you transition it into a digital system, you should only make that case, I think, if the experience is either equal or better, right? If the experience becomes worse, then I think that it's not the best strategy for you to implement as a business person, even if it saves you some money because it's cheaper.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said earlier, I'm starting to think that maybe this whole rise in digital and this obsessive need to be digital first, right, kind of accelerated the need of having design thinking more prominently represented in organizations.
That's interesting
because it does address the kind of main problem statement, right? That how do you bring back that human component? How can we better empathize with our customers to really understand their needs, so that we're not just translating a pure offline experience to a pure digital one without really factoring in all the things that could go wrong when you take out that human component.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I worked, this was a few years ago, I was working at an insurance company, a legacy insurance company. It's been around for a very long time, close to 100 years actually. And part of some of the projects I was working on was this digital transitioning, legacy, more physical in-person experiences, like walking into an agent's office and getting a quote, if you wanted to change your insurance, to making sure that this experience, to trying to get this experience 100% digitized, right? So that individuals wouldn't even have to, have conversations with agents. They would just be able to do everything online. And I would talk to a lot of people who were customers, and they were saying that, I don't want to have this experience transitioned to digital. Like I like picking up the phone and talking to a human. And I like walking into, my agent is, down the street. I like walking in and having them explain everything to me. It makes it simple. It makes it easy. There's a human element to it. I can, customize, ask questions if I want to, and really feel secure about, my decisions. And I'm not saying that it's impossible for technologists and people to take that experience and duplicate it perfectly online, but I don't know if you can ever get to that level. And there's going to be trade-offs. I think that there's a convenience aspect, from a consumer point of view, when it comes to taking a legacy system or a more in-person system and transforming it into a digital system. There's a component that makes it easier from the business point of view, or makes sense, dollars and cents from the business point of view. They can even, let's just be uncensored here. They can, eliminate positions. We've seen that's a trend of history, right? That we've seen going back to the Industrial Revolution, how technology eliminates jobs. And there's an element to that, right? You don't need these, this insurance company was basically having like a 5 to 10 year plan of eliminating a lot of positions in terms of their in-person stores. Always thinking about the customer experience, which is what we do. How do we make sure that human touch, or all of those kind of customizability of picking up the phone and calling somebody and speaking to an expert that can help you, how do you translate that into a digital experience? I don't know if there's one quick and easy way to just say that this is how you do it. And I think you do ultimately lose something, right?
And I've noticed, I've realized this, right, that a lot of these kind of digitized experiences is really moving away from a experience where things are served to you to an experience where it's self-service. And I'm just trying to wonder that is it just human laziness that we got so used to being served everything on a silver platter that now we're a bit reluctant to go for a fully digital experience? And I guess that differs, right, from industry to industry, depending on the
it depends, right?
Yeah. Because in certain industries where things are where the stakes aren't that high, right? Like just ordering groceries, I guess it's you're fine doing self-service. You don't want to, in fact, some people would even prefer just not having to speak to anyone and, pick up the phone and call your local grocer to deliver some goods. You'd rather just fire up an app and then just pick what you want, add it to a cart and hit, purchase or confirm.
This is good. I'm glad that you brought up groceries, because I think, and it gets back into the omnichannel point that I was making earlier, where it's about as UXers and people who are interested in making really good products from a customer point of view and creating experiences and being kind of agnostic to the technology, not just running straight to Figma or being like saying, let's make an app or something like that. But for groceries, one of the companies here in America called Target, which I'm sure a lot of, the audience members will be aware of, they had this really cool, in my opinion, and great omni-channel experience that really does create a benefit to, it gives the customers a benefit by thinking outside the box, so to speak, and really trying to create experiences instead of just saying, let's just take something and completely digitize it or just go straight to digital, which is, I'm going to forget the name. I think it's called Drive Up or Service Up. But anyway, you start in the app. And I mean, one of the things for me, for grocery shopping in these big box retailers that's annoying and just takes a lot of time is going into, Target or Walmart or something and walking around, especially if it's a new one, trying to find everything and then checking out. That could take a long time. I go to Costco a lot of times, and these are very big retailers, and it can almost sometimes take an hour. And this service, which you start in the app and you have to know kind of what you want already, but like, let's just say you want 10 or 15 items, you order it. Basically, it gets sent to the closest Target that, you live by. Somebody walks around, a Target employee picks out everything for you. Once they pick everything out for you, then you get sent a notification on the app saying, it's ready. You start driving to your Target. It automatically links with, it automatically tells Target that, you're a mile away. And as you pull up into the parking lot, which they have their own special parking spaces that you pull right up to the front, and somebody, because they've been notified, they walk out with your groceries, open up your trunk, put them in, and you drive away. It takes, no time at all. And that's a nice kind of omni-channel experience, which is not digital first. You could kind of think of it as digital first, but it's not digital only. And, this is, I think, the way that a lot of companies should actually start thinking, instead of just saying, how could we just go straight to the app? What's the best experience, and how can we bring together, atoms and bits and behaviors, right? So physical, digital, and then the human element to create a better experience from a customer point of view.
Right. No, so let's actually, dive a little deeper on that. You spoke on Or, how can we really understand behaviors better? So let's say hypothetically, somebody came up to you and asked you that, hey, I want to take my old school brick and mortar experience and turn it digital. As a researcher, what would be your sort of thought process in terms of how do we figure this thing out? I know it's a bit of a broad question, but I guess
it's a broad question, and being the researcher that I am, you always got to say it depends, right? But it is context specific. I mean, one of the things I can bring up and start talking about, I think, is tools and methods. I think that we've already mentioned, which are journey maps and service blueprints, this kind of thing, which is really getting a sense of what is, and thinking about it from a customer angle, customer point of view, building out those different touch points, seeing. It's not, to me, again, not thinking with my business hat on, thinking with my research UX, designer hat on. It really is about trying to look at the holistic experience, taking technology out of it, taking the business elements out of it. Now, you're going to have to, there's business goals and there's technology constraints that you're always going to have to be working with, but let's just get rid of those for now. What is the current state? Where are the issues? Going back to what I was saying before about the Target example, as a Target customer, if you were to ask me kind of what I don't like about shopping at Target, I think it's that element of kind of wasting time walking around finding things. And if you were to follow somebody around and understand their typical Target shopping experience and map it all out, you can start seeing where is the issues. What can we start to, from an experiential point of view, what could we start to improve upon? And these are metrics. These can be all types of metrics like satisfaction, efficiency, time it takes, all the things that we've heard, or, that we as researchers know and designers know that matter. And I think the business should also care about these metrics too, because, again, something we brought up in other conversations, you increase someone's satisfaction, you do something more efficient for an individual, you make something easier for them. That's going to increase their brand loyalty. That's going to make them want to come back. That's going to separate you from the competition. So I think it really does begin and end. What you're saying from a research point of view is you really want to start with understanding the current state, which will then allow you to kind of be more targeted with what you want to adjust, so that you bring about a better future state. And the better future state just simply means experientially, as the customer's going through that journey, how can you make it better? And, better is context specific, but I think there are some universals and some ways to generalize it. Like I just said, like satisfaction or time on task or, efficiency, simplicity, less cognitive load.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've noticed that, things.
Would you add anything to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that I totally do agree with you first and foremost. That would be generally one of the starting points that as a researcher, we'd kind of look into before we start mapping out what this ideal experience would look like. But I think that, in the case of, the Target example or any kind of grocery, where you're walking out with a physical product, right, in hand, or you have it delivered to you, it's a bit easier to kind of adjust for a more, to adopt a more digital first, but not digital only kind of experience. But the industries that I've seen that generally tend to struggle to strike a balance are the ones where there is no physical product that you walk out with. Mm-hmm. Right? Like banking, for instance. It's not like you go into a branch and walk out with a credit card. Right? It usually doesn't. I mean, if it did happen like that,
typically, it doesn't. It comes later, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so then, the need to go excessively down this digital only kind of route is what we've seen tends to hamper a lot of the banking experiences that we've observed, right? Where it's also the kind of industry or the kind of circumstance you're in where the stakes are a lot higher, right? If you lost about $10-$20 on groceries gone missing, you wouldn't worry too much. But if somebody messed up, if there was a human error or something that went wrong from a system error on your financials and your banking and where your money is stored, then things start to really spiral out of control in terms of, crisis management and so on for that customer. So I'm just wondering that.
No
what
doubt.
is it
I mean, and also the just to quickly add on to that, the experience that I was bringing up before, which was with the insurance company, like if you have an individual who's been with an insurance company for 20 years and they have a relationship with their agent as a human person, and you're now telling them, hey, by the way, you have to go, we're pushing you onto digital, we're pushing you online, and you have to do all of the things that you need to do there, even if it's like getting information or like paying a bill or something like that, something simple, it depends on the person, of course. And, it gets into personas and accessibility. One of the challenges, and I think we've talked about this before, which is when you're pushing people, you're taking something that's more legacy and you're pushing them into a digital system. The digital system is pretty unrelenting in the sense of that it's kind of built out, and it's not very malleable, so it's not customizable. And you're making somebody have to go through a typical journey. And if you're doing that and you're trying to generalize throughout the entire population, and if your population's big, it's millions of people, and you're having one service and everyone has to filter through that one digital journey or that one digital experience, how do you tailor it to all the different people with all the different needs? That's a challenge that I don't think we talk enough about, which is if you're taking something that like an individual who has who's an expert and that can deal with people kind of at a case by case basis, and you're taking that and you're translating it into a digital experience, you're not going to be able to satisfy all those. It's going to be much harder to satisfy all those cases. I mean, it goes, it's a really interesting thing, because I think a lot of times, and I think it's a really great point that you brought up, which is like a lot of times businesses are going like, okay, let's just take all of our legacy systems, all like the, in person, this kind of, things that are not being touched by the newest technology, and let's just try to crowbar, in a sense, them into this new technology because it's what people want. Sometimes they think of that, or it could save us money. But then you get into situations where the experience, you get a host of issues that we as designers now have to try to contend with. If you're taking a legacy system and you're digitizing it and the experience is going down, I think that's not only bad for the customer, right? It's bad for the business because the customer is going to get annoyed. I mean, it was what you were talking about too. Like sometimes it's just annoyance, but sometimes it's like my money, like where's my money? Or like I need to cash a check and the system is not working. Now, if I was in a branch, I could talk to a manager and get everything figured out. Now I'm trying to call a call center, and like it becomes a nightmare really quickly.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what I've noticed is that, just sticking with the banking example, is that they've segregated, customers by their affluence tier, and actually not just the affluence tier, but also how much money they keep with that bank. You could be someone super wealthy, but you might just have a basic product with that bank. And so you then get a basic experience. But until you decide to move in more money, you're not going to be eligible for that sort of wealth client experience where you get a relationship manager and you get that human component kind of served up to you. And what I've seen is that, yes, it works there. It's great there. But why is it that I don't, until or unless I don't put all my money with you, I'm not going to get the same experience either, right? Because, it's funny. I was watching a video the other day of this millionaire YouTuber walks into a Lamborghini showroom, super dressed down in a t-shirt and shorts, young kid, just about 18, 19 years old. He's got the money for the car, but he gets treated like, he's like a nobody. Like, the car salesman is just basically like entertaining this kid who just decided to walk into the showroom and check out the car. But in reality, he's got enough to buy 3 of them. Right. So I get this feeling that, when you kind of segregate people purely by what they bring to the table, or what they've already put on the table, rather instead of looking at what they could possibly bring to the table, we're potentially kind of losing out on a lot of, customers that they had a great experience with us, they might actually decide to buy to add more to it.
Again, I think it gets back to like when you're taking legacy systems and any process or experience, when you add technology to it, because technology is, in many cases, what you're trying to do is you're trying to, I use the word algorithm, but it's like you're trying to create an algorithm so that so you can have more control over the experience. But when you do that, the experience becomes very rigid. And that means that you're not designing for this person or that person. You can almost think about like a in-person, let's say, going back to the insurance example, like when somebody walks into an insurance office, that agent is almost designing for that individual human being, right? They're talking to them like a human. They're asking about who they are. They're talking to them about, what age they are. Like all these things kind of go into a conversation. And I'm sure that, after they've done it for years and years and years, they get a sense of how to kind of be with certain people and what questions to ask and what to know about them, and then tailor that experience or tailor that product to them just based on, 10 or 15 minutes of getting to know somebody. You can't really do that with a digital app. I'm sure there are ways around it, or you can ask people their age and then, almost, get into like, okay, so if it's this kind of persona, we're going to give them this kind of product, or if this person, but I haven't really seen anything like that happening. It's usually this cookie cutter experience. Okay, everybody's now getting it. And I think you lose something. One of the things I wanted to ask you also is really getting clear about, and maybe you have like a good example or a definition of like where digital transformation, goes wrong. I think we've already brought up one where it's like, when you're going through a digital transformation, you're creating one experience, and that experience is rigid because you're using technology. And now everybody has to pass through it. And it could satisfy some people, it could not satisfy other people. That's a challenge. But there are times when I think, digital transformation is good. Like I'll give you an example of going back to the banking space where, I like depositing checks using my phone. That's very quick. It's very simple when it works. And in the beginning, I remember like a few years ago, it would be a little wonky, but now I think through technology development, I rarely have issues. I don't even have to find, like before I would have to find like the right surface with the right color so that the camera could pick up the check.
Yeah.
Now it becomes it's much,
just more intuitive.
It's more intuitive, and it can breathe. It's just getting better at reading the check depending on the background. But that's I don't really need a more customizable experience. Like that makes it simple. I can do it from home. I don't need to go into a branch. It just saves me time. So that digital transformation seems to me to, I don't know if there's any really big issues with it, but of course there are other issues that we've been bringing up when digital transformation can go wrong. So maybe you want to talk more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the experiences that I've seen, observed are, those kind of experiences that lose out or lack in the personalization element. And you talked a bit about this also. Yeah. Where if we're not able to really personalize that experience, I think personalization is one step, but not the only step, right? The one that comes after that is the support and help that a customer might need halfway through the journey, right? And I've seen some companies, some banks that have been able to create sort of like I wouldn't say a live chat, because let's be frank, live chats can be a little clunky, but sometimes it fires up like a video call, and an agent pops up on screen, able to see exactly what you're doing, where you're stuck, and is able to guide you through it, right? But it's on more of a need by need kind of basis, so that see, at the end of the day, I think every organization would want to serve the customer the best possible experience, right? But they've had to draw a line in the sand to the point where, how do we deliver that experience without burning a hole in our pocket, right? Because the need for every business is to be profitable. Mm-hmm. So finding that perfect balance is what I've noticed tends to either make or break the success of an organization, right? But at the same time, I've also seen some organizations who've just blindly or who've willfully ignored the need to sort of serve customers in that fashion, or even look out to see what can we do to make things better, right? And this could be either as investing in some fancy tech that actually I wouldn't even call it fancy tech, just investing in some tech that allows for something like an agent to pop up on screen and through a video call and support, or even designing for accessibility needs, right, of people with disabilities and so on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways I think to get it for companies that I would recommend for companies to try to harness technology but not fall into the trap that we've been talking about, which is like, okay, let's look at our legacy systems. What can we do to just take these experiences and just digitize them? Because I think there's a faulty assumption, which is like, if we just do that, then it's going to be better. It's going to be better for us. It's going to be better for the customers. It's what they want. That's typically not always the case. It's partly why I think you said like design thinking's kind of come around the last few years, because in these corporations that are pushing for digital transformation, because it happens and then you go like, the experiences are just breaking down everywhere. And how can we, as people who follow the design thinking principles and methods and the UX principles and methods, increase and get these experiences back on track, right? I mean, one of the ways, and it was something we mentioned already, is to not it's the title of the episode is digital first, not digital only. Like, we got to think, in my opinion, more omnichannel, more technology agnostic, more experience first, experience led. And when you're thinking about experience and what's best for the customer, you don't go straight into saying, let's just translate all of what's happening already into a digital app or into a website or into something that's online, because something's going to be lacking. Taking those legacy systems and translating them down into a digital system, into a digital experience, and not fully understanding the needs and not fully understanding, I think being systematic about how it's being done, I think causes a lot of these issues. But then the other side of the coin there is that when you're looking for more omni-channel experiences, first off, there's instances when you just can't use omni-channel. You can't use physical and digital products together just because of the context. But there's also then it becomes harder, I think, because you have to have cross-functional teams. Not everybody knows everything about how to build these things and how to throw together, these, like what I was described, the Target example. I'm sure a lot of thinking went into that whole process of being able to eliminate if customers, if they don't want to walk around the store and shop and find everything themselves, how can we seamlessly eliminate that from them? And I think they did a pretty good job, but you have to have someone who's really seeing the big picture and having all those pieces come together holistically. That is kind of how I think UXers should be thinking about redesigning systems and experiences, but then getting support and getting, momentum, and then having teams get funded. These are all, hurdles and challenges that I'm sure, prevent these experiences to getting developed and getting implemented. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I've often, seen that a lot of the times when these kind of initiatives start about in organizations that, hey, we want to digitize this experience or digitize that experience, what tends to happen is that the focus, and this is more from a business-led standpoint, the focus is always just about how do we take this process and make it digital, right?
Yep,
but
exactly.
The cases where I've seen this kind of digital transformation really do well is when you've had R&D teams kind of evolve and level up to really think more than just the scope of that project and really think about the end-to-end journey, right?
Yeah.
All the way from the start, right? The point where the thought even pops into the customer's head that I want to get this product, all the way up to the end to when that fulfillment and delivery is completed. And even beyond that, on what the after sales and servicing part of the journey looks like. And I think when organizations start to really think about a holistic experience like this is when you start to really uncover a lot of the underlying needs that the org needs to take care of and resolve, right? Whether that is a technology upgrade or a new system or new journey or a new process, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the role of a service designer within an R&D team is just its importance has just gone higher up, right? I guess to further answer the question you asked earlier, that what are some examples of where I've seen this kind of digital transformation fail? I think the lack of a service design capability within an organization to really understand and map out that end-to-end journey is one of them, right? Because there's only so much you could do as a researcher of really understanding the customer. There's only so much you could do as a product designer of designing a slick experience that, factors in all sorts of needs from, regular old folk to the ones with the accessibility issues. But unless or until you've got a service designer on the team who can really help craft out what are all those different touch points.
You might disagree with me on this. And I think that I look at it differently than most people in the field, but I see what service designers do, what you just sketched out there, really, mm-hmm. where they're looking at the current state and they're building out these journey maps, and they're helping us understand what is. That is a research effort. Now, is it typically done by UX researchers? It can, yes. Yes. It does land within. I agree with you. It does land within more service design. They may not rely on the same kinds of methods that we do, but I see it as research. I see it as trying to get a better sense of the current state and understand your customers and their behaviors. I would almost want to see journey maps go from kind of get like a V2 journey map, which is a way of making them a little bit more validated and and almost quantitative, in a sense of, first kind of mapping it out. And maybe we can even talk about how we each approach, and we think about journey mapping, since it seems like it's a really important method that keeps on coming up over and over in this conversation to help. And I think the reason why is because, as we've been talking about, it's better to look at a holistic picture of what's going on and trying to architect that journey, instead of just saying, here's the current state, what it is, let's just make it digital, and that'll fix all the problems and that'll make everybody happy, which of course it doesn't, right? We know this. But for me, when it comes to journey mapping, I mean, I think that when these journey maps are getting created, and many times you have service designers or you have researchers who are talking to experts, who are talking to stakeholders, doing interviews, maybe some ethnography, but I would want to see these journey maps, get created, have them, of course, look beautiful. We want them to look the part, but we really want to make sure that these things are a source of truth. And the researcher in me is like, how do you get that to happen? Well, one of the ways you can get that to happen is to interview people and to have them talk to you about going through the journey, to make sure that these journey maps are validated and to make sure that they're based in reality. There's not just like, if you talk to, a lot of times, if you just talk to one or two individuals, and then you map it out based on their assumptions, you're making assumptions. So I would like to see journey maps, really be founded in reality and fact and research and evidence-based, so that when you're showing that to people, it really can be a source of truth and getting everyone on the same page. You can even do this maybe through data science. It really, again, always depends on the context, but as you're going through those different touch points, let's just say there's 25 or 30 different touch points, you can feed data into those touch points and really get a kind of quantitative understanding of, is this satisfying? Is this specific touch point satisfying customers? How many calls, if you were to take all of the, let's say, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but if you were to have a call center and you have all these calls, these complaints coming in, about a given journey, let's say, you're able to tag those calls based on the different touch points. You can literally look at your journey map. You can say, okay, touch point number 6, 4% out of all the calls that come in are about this one, the complaints, right? And then you go to, let's say touch point number 8, and it goes 80% of the calls are has something to do with this interaction, right?
Yeah.
There you have what you want, where to start.
Yeah.
And maybe that means digitizing that part of the experience. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe here's where the creativity comes in, but it's always in service, in my opinion, of how to smooth out that journey and how to create a future state, so that in that future state, when you look at the quantitative breakdown of the calls coming in, that it's not 80% of the calls are about that specific touch point or that specific interaction. It's 5 or 0 or whatever. So
right. So just taking assumptions and gut feeling and really painting what the true reality is.
Yeah.
So
And maybe that is the distinction between service design. I don't want to offend my service designer colleagues who are listening in, but maybe that is the main distinction. Whereas, they have this specific methodology, but maybe they're not as rigorous as maybe a quantitative or qualitative researcher might be, and really want to focus on not making assumptions and making sure that it's as true to reality as you can possibly get it. It's not going to be 100% perfect, but as objective as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I think that's a sound way of approaching it. Yeah. And it's just got me thinking as well, right? That is the prerequisite to even think of embarking on a digital transformation, to get your data and your core insights in order first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could totally see this not working the way we'd like if it was just a nightmarish job to fetch this level of data from what we're gathering, right? Like, yes, you want to paint a true reality, but if you don't even have the data to be able to do that, that sounds like problem number 1 to solve before, really setting out others. And if that's not resolved, then all you've got is a service map that's just made up with assumptions and gut feelings, right? So some I guess some of the operational or process oriented data can easily be collected, because, well, I guess the folks that are in the building doing the manual labor themselves, they can tell you what the reality is. But being able to really understand the behavioral side of the customer through quantitative methods is a project on its own to set up, right?
I've never seen. I mean, what I sketched out is more of a, like I was saying, going from V1 to V2. I'd like to see more people, when they're building out these journey maps, really try to take it to the next level, elevate.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be challenges. There's reasons why they're not like this now, and like you're saying, like connecting the right folks. It always goes back to kind of cross functionality and silos and this kind of thing, like navigating these political structures and business structures is very difficult, getting the right people in the right room for the right reasons. But, and there's going to be times when you have to make trade-offs and make sacrifices, and you're not going to be able to get it to the level that you wanted to get it if you have that vision and if you have that drive to really want to make a good, a journey map, the one that I was explaining, that could be really useful. You start small. You can start. You don't have to get it to that level immediately. And there is something to be said also, depending on what journey you're trying to map out. Some of it is just getting those interactions down, and you can use interviews, but I think you can get a lot of the way there, by just doing it yourself. Maybe that's another way of, I'm now kind of thinking of a service designer, but also doing stakeholder interviews in this. Like there is the interactions are the interactions, right? They're not that, it's not like, for one person, the interactions can be completely radically different than another person. So just getting those initial conversations and just getting a sense of how the process works, I think you can get you a lot of the way there. But I think what I'm trying to say too is like really kind of narrowing it down and really focusing on the customer experience and making sure that those things are validated. It's just another way to show it to stakeholders, show it to senior leadership of saying like, we really know what we're talking about here. We've diagnosed an issue, instead of saying like, okay, like we had some conversations, we made this really beautiful looking, journey map. We're assuming that this touch point or this interaction right here is the issue and we want to fix it. For me, it always goes back to impact and change. How do we make change? How do we bring about future states? To me, I've always had success when diagnosing issues. If you've done it rigorously with data, it's almost impossible to argue with. And when you're showing that to people, there are certainly times when they can disregard it or question it or whatever, say there's no budget, that's all fine. But there's a huge difference in the room when you're saying, we want to focus on this. We don't really know what we're going to do. We don't know how to solve for it yet, but we know that there's a problem. Here's proof, versus like, we're assuming based on our heuristics and our, years of background that this is where you want to focus on. It's just a different conversation. I don't know. I maybe people would disagree with me too, but to me, it's just a different conversation.
Yeah, I think to myself and maybe to a lot of viewers listening in, I think that that's a very obvious and textbook way of doing things right.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess I'm going to use this as a way of further answering the question you asked at the start, that what are some examples of where I've seen this kind of digital transformation go wrong? Mm-hmm. Is that you tend to often, organizations that are digitally transforming and moving into a digital space, and are trying to strike that balance between digital first and not digital only. A lot of the times those are organizations plagued by this sort of siloed way of working, right? Mm-hmm. And I think thinking back to some of my own experiences and the challenges that I've seen researchers and designers have to put up with that are beyond the typical scope of or beyond the typical challenges a researcher and designer would generally face, is that there's been a missing role that I think is needed for an R&D team to be successful in this kind of space, and that is the kind of role of an orchestrator, right?
Yeah.
Someone who can orchestrate and coordinate and be the people person to really bring a lot of these kind of teams in the room together and really start to co-create and collaborate, right?
It's difficult. Yeah, I agree 100%. But I think that these people are like needles in a haystack, because it's a role where you have to understand, all the things that we've been mentioning, like how to get data into, wrangled the right way, and working with designers and working with service designers, and then also where research fits into the big picture, and then how you wrap it all together and then sell it and then get it moving. Like that is a lot to deal with, right?
Oh, it goes beyond that as well. I mean, it's also understanding how technology works. What's the feasibility of that? Can some of these things actually be pulled off with our current tech stack and what's needed? Also understanding, what are some of the business objectives that we're trying to tackle right now, and KPIs that are at a CXO level that are being addressed. Like, I feel like you kind of have to really be the embodiment of design thinking, right? The center of the Venn diagram of business, technology, and design, to be that orchestrator. right? And like you said, you're absolutely right. This is a needle in a haystack kind of person. But if I've seen some digital transformations that have had these kind of individuals, and they had a lot to play in the success of that kind of creating the best possible experience while also meeting business objectives and technology feasibility. But if you were to ask me,
also the other thing too, just to jump in, is that this individual, which is not common, as at least I've seen it, is this individual has to embrace risk, has to be a person who wants to take risks. And they also, this individual has to be a person who has a vision and, has to be able to navigate a ship of people towards that vision and know when to make concessions and know when to change the scope. I mean, it almost is like a mini, to some degree, like a mini little entrepreneur. I think you can kind of look at it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it goes beyond the typical scope of a project manager, right? If there was someone who had to manage the project, I think it's the next level beyond that. And you're absolutely right. It does require a lot of that kind of entrepreneurial mindset and hustling and Gishido kind of behavior. I guess my question is then, how do you find that person, or how do you foster and build that kind of skill set to be that person? More people listen
to the YouX podcast. That's step number one.
Step number one. Wow. Subscribe to the YouX podcast.
I it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think that they're special people. Because a lot of times, in my, where I've seen projects struggle is, you're having this cross functionality and you're having the person, the project manager who's there trying to orchestrate it, leaves a lot to be desired in terms of how everything comes together. And it can cause, I've been on teams. I mean, I'll be candid. Like it can cause dysfunction and ultimately it's hard for the people who are working to do their job. But I think what's even worse is that at the end of the day, the customer is the one who suffers the most when the experience is not being focused on. It's more about just trying to get something out the door or look good or play the game, or not work overly hard and just kind of do the minimum and get this thing made. I'm not saying that always happens, but that certainly is something that I've seen, which has been hard to be on those kinds of teams. I think it's an individual who wants to achieve excellence. That's another aspect of that role. They want to go above and beyond.
Right. So I think we've kind of touched on this a little earlier, and we talked about how there are certain roles and responsibilities that have to be carried out and fulfilled as an R&D team. And a lot of that can overlap with other, like if you had to explicitly build out an R&D team that had researchers, service designers, and product designers, it doesn't necessarily mean that each one just fits in their own lane and sticks to that lane, right? So we can have researchers dabble in service design. You can have product designers dabble in research and so on. So if we've seen this digital first but not digital only mindset over the last, I guess, decade really start to take shape. So what would you say are some of the things that researchers and designers and service designers need to kind of adopt in terms of skills, talent, qualities to really help?
Well, it's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, I'll come at it from a different angle first. I think maybe from a more higher level, and then maybe that'll help answer your questions about specific skill sets. But I think there's two maybe mindset changes. One I mentioned already, which is, this idea of UX being synonymous with digital. I think that needs to have that meme not carry as much weight as it is now.
And a mythbuster it.
Yeah, completely kind of exercise it out of existence if we can. because I think that does hold a lot of people back from a big picture thinking point of view. It is that it really should be technology agnostic, focusing on the experience and assembling all that that journey and all the different touch points and interactions the best possible, what will ultimately provide the customer with the goals that they need to satisfy, and to make it as easy and as simple and as seamless as possible. And that can, of course, involve digital technology, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't and sometimes it will only be digital technology, right? Like that's fine too. It's just justifying why you want to make it 100% digital. Sometimes it will make perfect sense that the medium you want to create the experience in is a digital environment. That's fine. Would some other way satisfy the needs differently and better? Why box yourself in of saying we're only going to be creating this is going to be a digital only solution? And I mean, I think looking, like you said too, like trying to think of it end to end. So that's one. The other one is, I think, having also people conceptualize UX in the things that we do as R&D. I think I've seen on teams where people are struggling to understand that what we do is we create prototypes and future states. We try to bring them into existence, and then ultimately get them hopefully engineered and implemented. A lot of times we sit in the design space, which is more of the ideation, more of doing ideation. But having those two mindsets, I think, will really improve how the type of work and the type of outcomes that occur within human-centered design practices and teams, big and small organizations.
So we just talked about how what are some of the qualities and skills that R&D teams need to pick up and adopt.
So that's I think a separate question, right? So what I was getting at was more of like the mindset of we have to see ourselves as not focusing on digital only. First one, and then secondly, that what UXers are actually doing is R&D. That is our function. I think a lot of times you have UXers in organizations and even senior leadership, unfortunately, that doesn't really even see that what we're up to is a form of R&D. I mean, it's just human centered. It's more about creating experiences, not creating new technology just because the technology is cool. It has to always be connected to the user. This is what journey maps are. You start with current state, you understand the behaviors and how the interactions, and you then try to create a future state. So that would be two mindset shifts that I would hope to try to promote.
It doesn't actually just have to be limited to skills. I really like the fact that you've kind of tackled it from a mindset standpoint. Yeah. So if I had to just kind of take a crack at rephrasing that just to make sure I understood, you're saying that it's more about setting a understanding that it's okay to make, it's okay to fail. It's okay to mess things up, because that's the whole point of R&D, that this is a safe space to try things in a small, controlled manner and watch them fall apart and spot the ones that do succeed, so that when you do finally scale it up, you've got a working solution that's been R&D certified.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's experimental. And when it, following, and that's another maybe mindset change too, is, and you hear about design thinking a lot in different organizations, at least the ones I've worked for, but people actually following the framework doesn't happen very often. I've been in organizations, unfortunately, where they don't even know what prototyping is. They haven't even prototyped anything. And so I'm like, what is it that we're actually doing here? Like what's the impact? Where's the impact? Actually, where's the value of our work? So I think that following that framework and getting to things that have been, prototypes that have been properly vetted and tested, but having that narrative, that story with, empathizing first, what we talked about with the journey map, getting a sense of the current state, being able to be empirical and, evidence-based when we're locating issues and interactions or touch points that we want to kind of smooth or change, coming up with solutions, vetting those, and having that end-to-end process with something that has popped out at the end of it, which is this new thing in a scaled down lo-fi situation, form. And then it becomes a kind of marketing exercise where you have to get the right people on board to then get it implemented. And maybe that's not how it is in every organization, but the ones especially where a lot of this stuff is new and the maturity level's low, I think getting it to that point at least is a first step. There are maybe some organizations out there. I mean, if anyone knows of them, send them my way, because I'd love to work for them, which is this way of understanding how innovations get implemented is just part of the culture. And like, you don't even need to really even sell it. It's just, this is the process that we go through. And it can be a little bit messy and it can be experimental, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be, I don't want to put up, be like the police over how people operate, obviously, but having some ability to be systematic. And I think the key is really the narrative is if you can say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, and everyone can get behind that story, you're on your way.
Right. I think what you're describing is a customer-led organization that is higher up the, I guess, design maturity scale. Yeah. Right. That's
another, I think, episode, maybe the next one, but certainly in the future, I think I want to continue to talk about the elements that make up like a customer-led or design-led organization, because when you walk into organizations that aren't that way, it becomes a very difficult environment to navigate and even just get the work done, because they're not set up. They don't have the infrastructure, right? So maybe we want to devote a full episode of talking about what we think that infrastructure is. I'm actually reading Outside In that we can maybe bring up too, where they actually they delineate certain elements of a business that makes it, focused on CX or UX, so we can talk about that. So I think there's some good ideas in there.
All right. So, Chris, I think, we've talked quite a bit about a lot of different bits here. And just to, I guess, summarize this lovely little episode. So we've spoken about why this whole strategy even came about and what was the need, and that companies were, obsessively going down this digital only route and losing and missing out on the human component. We talked about the role that R&D plays, right, in terms of really bringing this kind of strategy to life as part of any organization's digital transformation. We've talked about what kind of digital transformations we've seen go bad, right? And what are some of the examples that came up from our own experiences, and what are some of the things that we spotted were missing and needed, for a successful digital transformation. And last but not least, we spoke about the paradigm shift or the mindset shift required within organizations across business, technology, and design to really successfully bring about a strong digital transformation and embody this digital first but not digital only mindset and strategy. Was there anything I missed?
No, I think that's a great summary, and I think it was a great conversation. I think a much needed conversation, because in many cases, in my experience, we might have lost the plot here a little bit from a UX professional point of view, where it's not just about taking legacy systems and making them digital. That doesn't ultimately just give you a great experience. I think it really is about focusing on the experience, focusing on individuals, and understanding, comes from a research point of view, understanding their behaviors and their mindsets, and what's working and not working from an experience point of view, and being a bit more, technology agnostic at first, and being more human, and starting there, and then using technology to enhance, not technology being seen as like the end all be all, but as a helping hand to really improve and enhance experience. And then I think that will then, trickle down into business success as well. So when the customer is winning, the business is winning. I think that's another good mindset to make sure that that we have as professionals. So yeah.
Amen to that. And on that note, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of the YouX Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and do share the link. Do share the podcast with all your friends and family.
Tell a friend, tell a colleague if you like it. So it would be great that we'd love a recommendation. So
that's a wrap for this episode of YouX. If you want to stay up to date with Chris and Mustafa's latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave them a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps other listeners find the podcasts and join in on the conversation. And don't forget to check the line notes to follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn for behind-the-scenes content, updates, access to comment boards, and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening to YouX, and we'll see you next time for some more insights into the ever-evolving world of user experience.